wish there was a magic button that would turn it into cash. Well, there is. Turn your closet into cash with Yaga. Start selling with zero fees by downloading the free Yaga app today.
Cash arrives at the ranch and is utterly terrified by what transpired. After making sure Finney and Savannah are okay and helping them inside, a desperate Cash rushes out and heads to the sheriff's office. There, Cash speaks to Sheriff Hollister and Deputy Sheriff Duke, and after explaining his situation, asks them for help. After spending the whole day running around town, trying to approach the problem from different angles, find a peaceful solution, and protect Rachel's legacy, to no avail, a desperate Cash decides to return to the lion's den and face Big Cat. There, Big Cat welcomes Cash and confesses that the debt was never about money and could only be paid back through his services.
When I have to send a message a second time, it comes from the body.
Before Cash can respond to this, Big Cat explains that she's looking to build an empire and needs his skills to reach her goals quickly, and confesses that she's always admired the way he covers his cold and professional skills under a friendly, personable demeanor, which charms and disarms his opponents. Then, Big Cat threatens to kill Finney if Cash refuses to accept her deal and informs him that he can have his ranch back after completing 3 jobs of her choosing. Having no other option, Cash breaks the promise he made to himself and agrees to return to the dark world that once destroyed him. On his way back to the ranch, knowing his boss, Cash wonders if 3 jobs will really be enough to set his family free and decides he must look for a backup way out at any chance he gets. Back at the ranch, Cash finds Finney drinking by a fire, joins him, and after the men bond over their shared grief, Cash comforts the drunk man and promises to always be there for him.
Grown man can take care of my own land, go take care of my wife. I'm a little girl.
It's sad to see a broken man admit that. Elsewhere, Big Cat tortures Harlan, hoping to force him to confess to his associates and make an example out of him. Later, in the wee hours of the night, Cash gets a call and receives his first assignment, dreading what awaits him. Cash joins the buck moments later, and the duo tails Harlan to find out his true intention. Harlan inadvertently leads the duo to his lair, where he reunites with his men and makes a plan for retribution.
Talking about revenge and calling in the footwear.
Once the duo gathers enough information, the buck calls his colleagues, and they prepare to ambush the unsuspecting men. Then, the doe orders Cash to guard the back door, gives him a gun, while the rest break through the front door and wipe everyone out. However, outside, as Cash proceeds to stop a fleeing man, he realizes that he was set up, and his gun is not loaded. Thinking on his feet, Cash reacts quickly, tackles the man to the ground, and neutralizes him before the doe soon arrives and murders him.
What?
When he gets home at dawn, Cash finds Finney pouring out all the alcohol in the house and proudly watches him, hoping with all his heart that it will work out for him this time. Then, as scheduled, despite not sleeping a wink all night, Cash accompanies Finney to go hunting in the woods. Later, Cash meets with Pastor Wilder and shares his predicament with the farm. Having been in his place not so long ago, the pastor understandingly hears out the stressed Cash and encourages him not to fall back down the dark side and give himself credit for the tough decisions he's had to make. Appreciating the pastor's advice, Cash opens up about his past and confesses that while working for Big Cat, he, Finney, and Rachel used to get high for days on end, partying like there's no tomorrow, and that at that time, all they had ever cared about was getting their next hit. As the duo continues their discussions, they celebrate their burnt and scarred right hands, which represent their freedom, and each shares their story with the other.
A lot of people never get on the right track. Is that what I'm doing?
A few days later, Cash gets the second call and meets with one of Big Cat's men.
In South Africa,
Rex,
we
to complete a
greet
massive
first,
drug
and
deal.
then we start conversation.
Not coming back.
So how about we
Later,
do that?
Lazarus
How's a
arrives,
hello?
warmly
How are
greets the
you?
duo, gets in the car and excitedly describes the
Hi,
outcome of the
Holland.
deal. Then,
I'm a
mistaking the
she.
duo's
I'm not a
stress for
he. I'm a
nervousness,
she.
he tries to calm them down and assures them that he knows the buyers well and will handle everything. A few minutes later, following Lazarus's direction, the trio reaches the meeting spot and started unloading the drugs. But soon, as Lazarus starts noticing that something's amiss, a nervous Wes shoots and kills him.
Nomfuneko. Unjani,
There
mama?
really is no honor
Stefan, how are you? You're back.
On Lazarus's phone and panics.
Thank you for coming back,
Cash calms
Stefan.
him down and takes control of the situation. However, a few minutes later, the buyers arrive, and just as Cash feared, start questioning Lazarus's absence. Cash and Wes try to calm the suspicious buyers and assure them they have nothing to worry about, to no avail. Sensing the rising tension and hoping to avoid a meaningless bloodbath at all costs, Cash tries to reason with the men.
Hello, Stefan.
However,
Missed
despite
you.
Cash's best efforts, all hell breaks loose as the men open fire unexpectedly. After minutes of brutal gunfight that ends up killing all the buyers except a young dealer, Cash tries to salvage what's left of the deal without killing the survivor.
We take the drugs, we take the money. Just
You know me, brah. Around this time, after work, after shower, this is what I do.
Naked people snack
What the fuck is
fancy.
making noise outside?
Because less money spent on insurance means more money to treat yourself. Visit naked.insure now. Get a car insurance quote in 90 seconds and start living like naked people.
Drained? Dehydrated? You have lost more than just fluid. You have lost vital electrolytes. Reach for Rehydrate. It delivers the right balance of electrolytes your body needs. Recover faster. Add Rehydrate, SA's #1 on
Ah, what happens there?
Gotta give props to Cash for going the extra mile to get things
Hello,
done.
Gracie.
Relieved by
How
the
are
young
you?
man's decision, Cash carries on with the deal and sends the lone survivor on his way. Then Cash and Wes load up the bags full
It's
of
okay,
drugs and
sweetie.
head back. On the way, Cash and Wes burn their truck to destroy evidence that can link them back to any of the crimes and call Finney to pick them up. Later, as Cash and Finney wash Finney's truck to remove evidence, Cash explains the details of his deal with Big Cat to Finney, who shares his concerns that it may all be too good to be true. After everything, would Big Cat let him go scot-free and let him and his family live in peace? He didn't think so, as everything he knew about the cruel woman disputed that. Hence, after thinking long and hard, Cash decides he needs a backup plan to secure his family's safety and contacts Deputy Sheriff Duke. Deputy Sheriff Duke arrives at the meeting spot expecting the worst as he remembers Cash's criminal history and is quite surprised to hear Cash's offer to work together and bring Big Cat down. After some discussion, the Deputy
I
Sheriff
will not
agrees
get
to
drunk
honor
because I
Cash's
will not
request
finish
that he
the whole
must remain
thing.
an anonymous
I
source
just want
in
to
the
drink a
case
little bit
for the
and smoke a
sake of
little
his
bit.
family's safety and promises to speak to his DA friend to find out exactly
Green
what they
beans.
need to get a conviction. The men then seal their agreement to work together with a friendly handshake.
I got you on that. I give you my word.
A few days later, Cash and Finney take
Miami,
some
Pella,
anatomy
I'm in South
practice and
Africa,
have a fun day,
so I don't know
teaching her
such
different
places.
techniques.
So you must explain to me that this place is a
Elsewhere,
club
Deputy Sheriff Duke
or a
stops
bar
one of
or
Big
just a
Cat's
place
drug
where you go
dealers
to
for
hang out.
speeding, and after ignoring her bribe, proceeds to investigate.
License and registration, please.
However, instead of following the deputy's orders, the dealer tries to attack the officer, and an altercation ensues. Luckily, the deputy quickly reacts, subdues the woman, and cuffs her as he continues inspecting.
Okay, now I don't
He
understand.
finds a
Fruits
trunk
and
full of
vegetables
drugs.
and then drinks?
Excited that he has finally found some evidence that can be linked
Mary.
to Big Cat, Deputy Sheriff Duke calls Cash and leaves a message on his voicemail.
You just stop big time.
That evening, just as Cash gets home and listens to the deputy's message, the Buck and the Doe arrive and order him to take a ride with them.
I'd unlock you. Well, we don't think much of you either. So I guess we'll just have to risk it.
Cash reluctantly gets in the car, and as they drive away, he starts wondering what this was all about and tries to think of ways to protect himself if things go wrong. Then, after a few minutes of driving,
I
the
live
trio
in South
arrives at
Africa,
Big
babes.
Cat's mansion, which is filled with all of her associates. Then, once everyone's there, Big Cat gathers her crew.
Wow,
and
that
makes
must be
announcements.
nice. You know, here in South Africa, if the place sells fruits and vegetables, trust me, you will never get any alcohol
Goes to
there.
the living room, and
They're
as he
usually
stands by the
sold
fireplace,
separate.
the very same one
Separate
who's
shops.
forced
So you have to
burn
go
his
to one
right
shop for
hand
the fruits,
in the name
and
of
then you have to go to a
freedom,
different
while
shop to
memories
get
of
your
the painful night
alcohol
come flashing back.
or your
Those
drinks. So if you
scars
can
don't
get
seem
all of that in one place,
Then, Following Big
Bigs
Cat's
up.
orders for everyone to gather and watch the special entertainment for the festive night, Cash rejoins the group.
Hello,
As everyone waits with
Ntombo
anticipation,
unjani?
Big Cat wheels in a tied-up and severely beaten-up deputy sheriff, Duke, and reveals him to the excited crowd. Cash
Ubizwa
stands
ngonombuzo
frozen
noma
as if
ubizwa
he saw a
ngontombi?
ghost and suddenly feels suffocated by the weight of the revelation. Then, as he tries to process what lies before his eyes, questions fill his head. How did the
Almost
deputy
done.
get here? How can he possibly help his new partner? Then, as per their boss's order, the buck and the
In
doe
South
brutally
Africa,
beat up the
it's
officer, while the
called
rest of the
a
crew
liquor store
whimpers in
too.
fear, and
But
the
you'll
room
never
goes so
find any
silent
fruits
that
in a
pin
liquor
drop
store.
can be heard.
You're not gonna find any vegetables in a liquor store.
Then,
You'll most likely
unfazed by
find
everything,
liquor
Big
and
Cat
then some
continues
snacks,
to
maybe
torture
some
the
chips. But
officer
other
and
than
asks
that,
for a volunteer
that's the
to finish
only
the
thing you'll
job.
ever find at a
Meanwhile,
liquor store.
standing in the back, Cash fights an internal battle
Like at
to
a
keep
place
his
where you
sanity
get
in light of
beer,
the horrific brutality, and decides
you will
that the only
never
thing
get
he can do for the deputy
bread.
right now is end his
You
torture
can't buy it from the
by
same place.
any means necessary. And if that means killing him to put him out of his misery, that seems rather justified.
Hi, Grace.
As
Almost done.
momentarily
Almost
silencing the
done.
chaos brewing in his mind, Cash steps up.
We have the whole night together, guys. No need to rush.
There.
However, Big Cat ignores Cash's suggestion and, in one swift movement, slits the deputy's throat and kills him. Shocked, Cash takes a moment to gather himself and makes a daring announcement.
Done.
So who else like me is coming back
That
from
night,
work?
Cash returns to his
I
shack
just did a
and
12-hour
replays
shift.
everything in his mind. After putting
Are
together
those
all that
hearts
has
for
happened
me?
so far, he decides
Who's
that
giving me
since violence
hearts?
seems to be the
Stop
only
making me
language
blush,
Big
guys.
Cat
Stop
speaks,
it.
he can no longer afford to shy away from it. And with the deputy no longer in the picture, he decides he must take justice into his own hands and prepare for war, as it seems the county is suddenly too small for both him and Big Cat. The next day, the buck goes through the deputy's phone, learns of his partnership with Cash, and immediately reports it to Big Cat, who declares war on Cash.
Andrew
Now,
is
sober,
back.
seeing things clear, Finn wakes up early that
My
night
dinner for
and
tonight,
prepares to go to church
guys.
for the first time since his wife's burial. However, he soon receives a call from a distressed Cash, who reveals that he
So
will be
after I
busy
smoke
collecting evidence on Big Cat all day,
and relax,
and after refusing
this
his
is what
help,
I'm having for
advises him to go
dinner.
to church with Savannah. Hence, Cash goes around the small county surveilling Big Cat's numerous farms and making a detailed note of their location.
Andrew, nice to
Savannah
see you
and
back,
Finney reach the
sweetie.
church
How are
and
you?
quietly sit down to learn the sermon. Upon
Last
seeing
spoke to you
Finney, the
yesterday, I
pastor's
believe.
overjoyed
Don't think we've
and
spoken
gives a
today at all.
specialized sermon on guilt and anger,
Don't
which
think
proves to be a little
again.
too much for Finney, who steps out shortly after to get some air.
Ja bless,
Service,
ja bless,
Finney
John.
reunites with his daughter and sincerely apologizes to her for being consumed by guilt and failing to be there for her, which she wholeheartedly accepts. Moments later, the pastor joyfully welcomes Finney and promises that he and his congregation are always there for him. Then, as everyone proceeds to leave, Finney offers to take Savannah to lunch at the local diner, and the duo starts walking.
I'm
to
too
their
tired
car.
to cook,
However,
bruh.
out of nowhere,
I
Finney
drove past that
leaves
shop
and start demanding to know where
and I got
Cash is
noodles.
before chasing
So this is
Finney
just
and
5 minutes. We
Savannah
throw it in a
around the
bowl, we
parking
throw it in a
lot,
microwave.
separating them and beating
We're
Finney
done.
to a pulp. Luckily,
That's
the
all I'm
pastor
having
soon
tonight.
arrives on the scene and rushes through the terrified crowd to rescue Savannah from the goons, who
Hello,
quickly flee the
Zay.
area. Moments later, due to his severe injuries, Finney is taken to the hospital, where he tragically succumbs to his brutal injuries and dies. Elsewhere, after hearing the events that
We have weed
transpired
shops
in the
around here
parking lot,
too.
Sheriff Hollister visits Big Cat at her mansion.
Saying I need you to make it a little easier on me. People are watching now.
Choose your price up front. Then ride.
The Barry authorities meant to protect and serve, conspiring with the devil? There's no place to go. Elsewhere, Cash arrives at
Zay,
the hospital
stop
and is
it, dude. I'm
devastated to
tired.
hear
It's
of
been a
Finney's
long
death
day.
and summons all his
It's like
strength
20
to
past
remain
7
calm
p.m.
and
I'm
comfort his
tired.
distraught niece
Coming
before
from
asking
work,
the pastor
I'm
to look
feeling
after her
low.
and setting out to deliver some justice of his own. Cash then trails the doe around town, and once he reaches an isolated
I
farm,
take my one
it's the
drive.
perfect opportunity to challenge him to a gunfight. After a brutal fight, Cash kills the doe, but gets knocked out in the process. Later, Cash wakes up and, utterly relieved no one has discovered
I
him,
will not
flees
stop
the area.
smoking, Grace,
Seconds later,
unfortunately.
the police
Sorry.
and Big Cat arrive at the scene and learn of what had transpired.
Found the family's truck in the woods.
Elsewhere, on the hunt for Cash,
Dude, they opened a Walmart here in South
pastor's
Africa and
house,
wow.
demanding he tell them
Can't
Savannah's
wait to see
whereabouts
all the
and start
cheap
beating him up
stuff.
relentlessly when he refuses to cooperate. Savannah hears this commotion from her hiding place and, hoping to save the pastor's life, makes a bold decision.
It's my girl. She just saved your life.
Savannah is really brave. I definitely couldn't do that.
How about you greet
After a
first and then
treacherous
start
journey on
asking
foot,
for a
Cash
smoke?
reaches the pastor's
Say
house
hello.
and is alarmed to
How
find
was
the
your
front door
day?
open. Prepared
Talk to
to
me.
find the worst case scenario, Cash cautiously enters and finds the pastor, who profusely apologizes for failing to protect Savannah, preparing to join the war.
They took her from me. I'm sorry.
Glad Cash has an ally.
Are you going now, Gracie? Why are you
The
talking about
pastor
sleeping?
and
It's
Cash
after
speak
7,
to the law
dude.
firm and
Don't go
kidnap
anywhere.
Zeke in broad daylight.
We're still
This
hanging
news
out, listening
reaches Big
to
Cat, who was in the middle of
Florida
personally
stories,
babysitting
Miami
Savannah. And before she
stories,
can
Georgia
react, she
stories,
receives a call from
Walmart
Cash.
stories.
Moving to the rock plan. Having 280.
Hi, Corey.
Big Cat decides
Welcome.
twice to
So
monitor
happy you
the
could
tide of
join
Savannah and
us.
leaves the room to devise a plan. Elsewhere, Cash also adapts to the change of plans and sneaks in through the back of the mansion, while the pastor drives through the front gate, enters the compound with Zeke, and demands a trade.
Whew.
Hell, now you're speaking my language.
Big fan of
Meanwhile,
ribs.
inside the
Ribs
mansion,
are
Savannah
amazing.
uses
Pork ribs.
Wes's moment of distraction to
Meat,
slowly
basically.
and
I love
cautiously
meat. You can
cut
bring
her ties
chicken, you
on
can
the living
bring
room fireplace.
beef,
It's quite poetic
you
that
can
Savannah gets her freedom from the
bring
same fireplace her
fish,
uncle got his.
prawns,
Then, forced
anything
to
meaty
agree
I
to a
love.
simultaneous trade to save her son,
Love,
Big
love,
Cat
love some
gives out
meat.
her orders.
That happens.
Love meat.
Down the road.
However, to the shock of everyone, before the men can return to the mansion and bring out Savannah, she unties
Really?
herself and kills
Must
Wes
make me
with a
some. I like
shotgun.
them
The unexpected
sticky.
gunshot sends
You know when they're
shockwaves
sticky
through the
and they
estate, and all
love
hell
the
breaks loose as
sweets
everyone
and
runs
also
everywhere.
like
And
spicy
soon,
food.
a
So,
gunfight
yeah.
ensues. After a lengthy and intense battle, the pastor is severely injured and passes out while Zeke escapes. Then, as Zeke tries
John,
to
I
run to
am gonna
safety,
smoke
he's
again,
caught in the
unfortunately.
crossfire and is injured, which forces him to retreat to the woods and face the agitated guard members. Meanwhile, inside the mansion, the teenager holds her own and leads the
You were
buck
working,
chase around
Andrew.
while pausing
Me
to shoot
too.
back
Me
at
too.
invitation. Luckily, as the chase escalates, Cash makes his way into the mansion through the back door and takes his niece's
Hi.
place, facing off with the buck. Then, after an intense
Hello.
battle, the men run out of ammunition.
It's spicy
get
food. I
into a
love
physical
spicy
fight
food.
in which Cash
Love me some
stabs the
Indian
buck
food as
and
well.
outside, Big Cat hears Zeke scream
Enjoy
from the
Indian
woods,
food.
rushes over and is heartbroken to find him dead, and cries over his body, apologizing for not protecting him. Then, filled with burning vengeance, she marches towards the house to finish the war for good. Inside the
Yes,
mansion,
that's
Big
the
Cat
job.
finds an injured Cash being helped up by
Thank you for the
Savannah
hearts,
and
guys. I love
opens
it. I love
fire,
it. Thank you so
severely
much.
injuring him.
Appreciate it.
Terrified, Savannah drags her uncle to momentary safety, and as she frantically tries to figure out what to do, Cash gives her a stern order while he
Hi,
opts to stay back and
Wendy.
await certain
So
death.
glad to see you back. Don't know why I'm
Unable to
Google
walk
all of
away
a
from her only
sudden.
family, Savannah returns back
I
unexpectedly.
vape too,
Sneaks
like,
up on Big Cat,
mm.
stabs her to death,
This is
and
my number
rescues
one.
her uncle and the community that has been suffering at the hands of the cruel
Hi,
woman and her
Moses.
insatiable greed. A few months later, both the pastor and Cash recover well. The pastor returns to the church where he continues giving Sunday services and teaching the community. Meanwhile, Cash and Savannah
I
continue
do
looking out
deserve
for
it
one another on the
after
ranch and peacefully tend
12
to their animals.
hours of hell. Well, being with you guys is not hell, but being at that
Promised
place
yourself that you'd
sometimes.
finally
Yeah.
list that purse today, but you just wish there was a magic button that would turn it into cash. Can you imagine how much money you have in the things you don't use anymore?
Stop
Can you
it.
imagine giving them a
I
second
like it.
life? Well, you don't have to imagine. Turn your closet
Yeah, weed
into
makes me
cash
sweet.
with
Weed and
Yaga.
wine make me happy.
Download
They
the
make me
free
smile.
Yaga
And
app today
friends.
to start selling with ease.
3
And
things.
0 selling
Weed,
fees.
wine, conversation. We're good. Hello, Dennis. No, Andrew, you cannot.
What would you do if a harmless prank at the stroke of midnight turned out to be the curtain-rising chain of bloody murders? Inside an isolated, brooding manor house, a group of close
I'm
friends
scared of what
decide
you
to
wanna
play a
ask me. I'm
joke on a man
scared.
who suffers from sleeping like the dead, secretly hiding 8
Wendy,
alarm
let's be
clocks
good
around
friends
his
and then
room,
we can move
eagerly
on to the
awaiting a
numbers.
raucous morning full of laughter. And yet, Come morning, the bedroom door is
Ribbon.
locked from the inside, and that laughter never arrives. The victim is found lying motionless on his bed, his body long since cold. The most chilling detail of all, only 7 alarm clocks remain at the scene, deliberately arranged in a neat row along the mantelpiece like some ritualistic offering, whilst the 8th has vanished without a trace. There are no signs of forced
You
entry,
don't know how
no
I'm
murder
built, I'm
weapon to be
sitting
found. A blood-curdling silence engulfs the manor and swallows whole those still left alive. And that is merely the beginning of a terrifying
I'm from South
nightmare,
Africa,
as one death after
Dennis.
another continues to strike in broad daylight. The killer
If it wasn't
is no invisible
disrespectful, you
specter.
would have
They are
asked
lurking
it without
amongst the
asking if you
innermost
can ask me a
circle, pulling
question.
every string from behind a smile
You would have
so
just,
benevolent it
hi,
makes
like
your
everybody's
skin
doing,
crawl.
hi, where
Welcome
do you
to the most
live, where do you work,
spectacularly
what do you
twisted
do?
locked room mystery,
That's a
where the
question, but
horrifying
the fact
truth
that you had to
lies
say,
buried
can I
beneath
ask
the
you
soulless
something?
ticking of clocks.
I
Embrace
don't
yourselves,
know.
because the mastermind behind it all is guaranteed to send a chill down your spine. The story begins in 1925, when Eileen's mother hosted a lavish masquerade ball at their family estate.
Kenya.
The evening
I've
was
never been
attended by
outside of
many
South
wealthy
Africa,
businessmen
dude.
and powerful politicians, most notably the steel magnate Viscount Coote and his wife, young Eileen, unwilling to listen to
Never
the
been to
adults' tedious
Kenya.
chatter, sought out Ronnie and Bill, 2 talented young men working at the State Department, to share a drink and unwind. Eileen was astonished to discover that the 2 men were carrying numerous alarm clocks. Ronnie explained that their mutual friend, Wade, was a heavy sleeper, so they had planned a mischievous prank. They would set up a bunch of alarm clocks in his room
I
to scare
am
him the next
enjoying
morning.
some
For Eileen,
dry
Wade was
red
incredibly special. They were
wine.
childhood sweethearts who grew up together, but war unexpectedly broke out when they reached marriageable age. Wade and Eileen's brother were both sent to the battlefield, where bullets were relentless and harsh. Tragically, Eileen's brother
The
died
hearts are
heroically,
killing me.
and Wade risked his life to carry her brother's body back from the battlefield. Now that the war was over, they planned to rekindle their romance. They arranged to have dinner together this weekend, and Wade subtly hinted that he intended to propose to Eileen. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of the deputy sheriff of the State Department, a bald
You're
man
making
who
me
had long
blush.
coveted
Stop
Eileen's
it.
wealth and status. Meanwhile, upstairs, Ronnie and Bill had sneaked into Wade's bedroom. They hid alarm clocks in every nook
It's
and
too late for
cranny
me
of
to
the
be
room,
blushing.
confident that this time they would give Wade a huge surprise. However, tragedy struck the following morning when Wade was found dead in his sleep. Police arrived quickly, but ironically, the officer dispatched was a clumsy rookie, so inept that he broke a crystal glass and appeared completely inexperienced in solving crimes. Eileen's family doctor, after a preliminary examination, concluded that Wade likely died from a combination of sleeping
There's other
pills and
people in the
alcohol, and
building.
the scene looked like suicide.
But
Eileen
I
immediately
pay for
objected,
this
saying
place.
that Wade had asked her out for
But
dinner the
this
night
is
before,
my
so there was no
house.
way he would have taken his own life so
Not big.
senselessly. Ronnie, standing
It's
beside
just
her,
one
argued that the
room, the
recent
shower,
work pressure
we
at
share
the
the
State
shower.
Department was immense, making suicide not impossible. It was at
That's
this
how I know.
moment that Eileen noticed a highly unusual detail. 7 alarm clocks were neatly
Yes, we
arranged
are
on the
good people. Where are
fireplace
you from?
opposite the bed. She immediately turned to ask her 2 friends if they were the ones who had
Zay,
arranged
you've
them
been
that
here
way.
the whole
Ronnie shook his
time. Why are you
head,
saying
vehemently
huh?
denying it, explaining that he and Bill had hidden all the watches and hadn't displayed them so conspicuously. Eileen stepped out of the room and saw from a distance Mrs. Coote loudly scolding her maid, while outside the manor, the voice of Viscount Coote could be heard. Mrs. Coote immediately turned and left to see the guest out. Eileen's mother escorted the guest to the door and whispered to Viscount Coote that their agreement was due in 3 days, and that her family had no habit of returning what they had received. Viscount Coote replied that he understood and assured her. Returning to the crime scene, Wade's body had already been moved. Eileen checked the room again and found the mark of a bottle on the bedside table, most likely the sleeping pill that had killed Wade. Strangely, a similar mark was visible on the writing desk next to it, indicating Wade had sat there writing the night before. Eileen tried pulling out the desk drawer, but it was stuck. Without hesitation, she used a tool to pry it open. A wave of grief overwhelmed her, causing her to lose control for a moment and smash things to vent her anger. About a minute later,
Okay,
after
I'm gonna
calming
Google
down
it.
amidst
I've
the
never heard
chaos,
of it, but I'm
Eileen
pretty sure it's
accidentally found a
beautiful.
letter in the drawer. It was a
King is
letter
very
Wade had
beautiful.
written to his younger sister, Lorraine, with rather strange content. Wade arranged to meet his sister in the city and mentioned the phrase 7 7 dials. Eileen felt a chill run down her spine as she looked at the fireplace. There were exactly 7 clocks there. Was this just a coincidence? Eileen went outside and sat listlessly on the steps just as Jimmy came to
There is
comfort
a
her.
strong
Eileen, weeping,
woman of
begged
the
Jimmy
house.
to help her find a woman named Lorraine, as
Strong.
Wade had written to her before he died. Jimmy readily agreed and promised to do it. With a heavy heart, Eileen wandered the grounds, pondering the phrase 7 dials, when she suddenly spotted a broken alarm clock on the lawn in the distance. Returning to the manor, Eileen called Ronnie, who confirmed that they had hidden a total of 8 clocks the previous night, but all were in the bedrooms and none had been thrown into the garden. This detail further convinced Eileen that it was a murder, but the large number of guests the previous night made identifying the culprit extremely difficult. Ronnie advised Eileen to remain calm and wait
Enough
until
with
he
the
finished
hats
work
now.
so they could investigate together, but Eileen couldn't wait any longer. Immediately after hanging up, she sought out the maid, Emily, to ask what Lady Coote had said before
No, I will
leaving
not.
that morning. As Emily answered, Eileen shrewdly noticed the
You
same
want a
traces
porn
of
show?
a
You
sleeping
go to
potion bottle on the maid's
Xvideos.
table as at the crime scene. Emily hastily explained that she had
Hi,
confided in
Kenneth.
Mrs. Coote
You
about
are
her
not good for
insomnia,
me.
and Mrs. Coote had kindly given her a sleeping potion. But strangely, it had been stolen the previous night. Emily swore she had nothing to do with Wade's death. Without further questioning, that afternoon, Eileen dragged Ronnie to the
Thank
market and asked
you.
if he knew anything about the
Seriously,
7
Mr. Chair.
dials. Ronnie was completely bewildered, not understanding the term. Suddenly, Eileen changed the subject because she noticed a man who looked exactly like Detective Watson staring at her. Ronnie stopped to observe
No,
and
thank
asked if she
you.
knew him. Eileen shook her head in denial, but insisted that the man had been following her for a long time. The stranger suddenly turned and disappeared into the bustling crowd. Ronnie asked Eileen what they were doing there, but before he could finish, Eileen proactively approached an acquaintance, Mrs. Coote, who was strolling through the streets. It turned out Eileen was there to confront her. She immediately asked directly about the sleeping potion, but Mrs. Coote replied very briefly that she didn't know and didn't understand anything, then turned and walked away. Ronnie reassured Eileen not to worry too much, saying he would discreetly investigate the matter to ensure her safety, as Wade certainly wouldn't want her in danger. As soon as Ronnie left, Eileen saw the mysterious man again. She immediately followed him through the streets and saw him enter a public telephone
What do you
booth.
think I'm
About
watching?
half a minute later, as the man walked out and disappeared around the corner, Eileen rushed to the phone booth. Quickly, she picked up the receiver and told the operator that her boss had accidentally hung up and asked them to reconnect the call because it was extremely important. After a brief wait, a man's voice, identifying himself as from the London Police Department, answered. Eileen returned home with a suspicious look on her face. She intended to drive to the London Police Department to clarify the man's identity, but her mother stopped her, advising
I
her
actually
not to cause
smoked
more
for my
trouble
own
and to let the
respect.
police handle the
Thank
murder.
you.
Ignoring her mother's words, Eileen
Yes.
grabbed her
Oh, yeah.
keys and rushed out of the house. Her mother could only sigh, looking at the photograph of her deceased husband and lamenting how much her daughter resembled him. While Eileen was on her way to London, 6 people in the city simultaneously received phone calls summoning them to a meeting hall for an urgent and secret meeting. Meanwhile, at Eileen's house, the old butler brought a letter addressed to her.
No,
Eileen's
I'm not
mother,
married.
impatient with trimming flowers, told the butler to open it and read it immediately. The butler opened the letter and was stunned for a moment before reporting that it contained only a single warning, not to interfere in the affairs of the 7 dials anymore, or she would lose her life. The scene shifts to Eileen, who suddenly slammed on the brakes, opened the door, and stepped out with an expression of disbelief upon seeing someone lying motionless not far away. She ran closer, sat down, and turned the victim over, only to realize it was her best friend, Ronnie. He was gasping for breath in a pool of blood, trying to speak to her with his last breath. In his dying moments, Ronnie whispered the words, 7 dials. He begged Eileen to tell someone the truth
I
before
did
taking
not
his last
stare
breath in her
at you.
arms. After Ronnie's funeral, Eileen revealed to Jimmy that in his final moments, Ronnie had tried to leave a message. Tell Jimmy
Hello
about
to
the
you
phrase,
too. You
7
can greet
dials.
first
Jimmy was
and then start
completely
asking the
bewildered. He didn't
questions.
understand the meaning of the phrase, as he had never heard of it before.
Le-
Eileen also shook her head in confusion, but she remembered that Wade's letter to his sister Lorraine before he died had also mentioned this mysterious phrase. Mentioning Lorraine, Eileen's story reminded Jimmy of the task she had assigned him earlier. He announced that he had found Lorraine's whereabouts and suggested they meet her that afternoon. Hearing this, Eileen's steps faltered as she suddenly noticed a man who looked like Dr. Watson lurking nearby. Without time to explain to Jimmy, who was bewildered and eager to know what was happening, Eileen hastily left him behind, jumped into her car, and sped off in pursuit of her target. The chase was incredibly intense throughout the journey into central London. Just as the two cars were locked in a close pursuit, seemingly on the verge of colliding, the man's car suddenly stopped right in front of
Must
the
be
police
amazing to
station.
have a nice
Eileen
figure.
also braked, cautiously following him through the corridors, and finally
I have a
saw
nice
him enter
full
an
figure
office.
too.
Without hesitation, Eileen pushed open the door and went inside. The man inside seemed to know who she was. He introduced himself as Battle, Chief Constable of the London Police, who was directly in charge of investigating Wade's case. Based on the available evidence, he had concluded preliminarily that it was a suicide. Eileen was extremely upset and indignant at this superficial conclusion, arguing that Wade had clearly been poisoned and would never have committed suicide in such a senseless way. Seeing her resolute attitude, Chief Battle's expression suddenly changed. He sternly pointed out the harsh reality that Wade died at her manor and Ronnie died right in front of her car. If these were indeed consecutive murders, Eileen herself could not escape involvement. Eileen merely scoffed at the implicit accusation, presenting Wade's letter and questioning him about the phrase 7 Dials. While reading the letter, Battle casually remarked that the 7 Dials was a place long since deserted. This slip of the tongue made Eileen immediately realize it was a specific location, not a code. Realizing his slip of the tongue, Battle stood up and with an extremely serious demeanor warned Eileen. He advised her to stop investigating for her own safety. He especially urged her to absolutely refrain from asking about or finding out anything more related to the 7 Dials. He warned that this place was far too deep and dangerous for a young girl like her. At the same time, he also understood that the more he tried to forbid her, the more likely she was to do the opposite. The police's objections only fueled Eileen's curiosity more intensely than ever. She arranged to meet the chubby Bill to question him about the mysterious place. Initially, Bill pretended to think about it and denied ever hearing about it. However, Eileen immediately exposed his clumsy lie, pointing out that his eyes habitually darted upwards whenever he lied, and he had just done exactly that. Caught red-handed, Bill sighed helplessly and admitted the truth. He revealed that the 7 Dials was actually a nightclub located in a slum, a gathering place for all sorts of people. It used to be bustling, but now it's deserted and nobody comes here anymore. Although Bill didn't want to return to that chaotic place, he couldn't sway Eileen's determination. After dinner, the two drove into the old town. The 7 Dials Club was hidden away at the end of a dark, gloomy old street. The moment the large doors swung open, a dark secret seemed to await them. Eileen saw her family's former butler standing before her. He had suddenly quit and disappeared without a trace after her father's death. When Eileen questioned him, the butler seemed quite displeased and curtly replied that he left because her mother refused to pay his wages. Eileen could only offer an awkward smile. As this was the first time she had heard such a story, stepping inside, the atmosphere of the 7 Dials Club was completely different from what Bill had described. It was incredibly lively, filled with young people dancing enthusiastically to the upbeat music. Bill was surprised, as the last time he had been there, the place had been completely deserted. While immersed in the dance, Eileen's keen eyes spotted the former housekeeper stealthily going upstairs. She immediately signaled to Bill, and they followed. The upper floor was decorated in an antique style, with cobwebs covering the passageways, giving the impression of being abandoned for a long time.
Dude,
Naked people have weird hobbies. Because
you wanna
less
see
money
some
spent
pussy,
on
you
premiums
fucking go on
means more
X
money
videos.
for anything else. Visit naked.insure now. Get a car insurance quote in 90 seconds and start living like naked people.
New Everclar AZ Gel Cream by La Roche-Posay, powered by Derm Recommended Actives.
Hello, Trevor. How are you?
The hallway was narrow and dark, with only one room revealing a sliver of light through a crack in the door. Eileen took off her hairpin and skillfully used the technique her father had taught her to pry open the lock. The room was much larger than she had imagined, so quiet that only the sound of footsteps and the creaking of the wooden floor could be heard. In the center of the hall stood a large round table, surrounded by 7 chairs. The tabletop was inscribed with ancient Roman letters numbered from 1 to 7, bearing many scratches from age. While Eileen Eileen was still wondering about the meaning of the numbers, a sudden rush of footsteps echoed outside. In desperation, she quickly ducked into the wardrobe to hide. The footsteps grew closer, sounding like a large group. Through the narrow gap in the wardrobe door, she saw figures moving past and heard the scraping of chairs on the
Hi,
floor.
Stefan.
Eileen held her
Not
breath
going
and
to
counted
sleep.
6 people sitting around a round table. All of them wore black cloaks and masks with Roman numerals corresponding to their seating positions. The room fell silent for a long time before a woman asked if Ronnie's
it
case
is
had been handled
burning.
smoothly. A man replied
Yes,
that the police had concluded it was an accident. The
Like, I
woman
cannot wait
continued
for
to
summer to
emphasize
be
that
over.
Dr.
It's
Marr's
fucking
secret
burning.
formula absolutely must
Every
not fall
single
into the hands
day.
of outsiders. The man continued, saying that Deputy Secretary of State George Lomax would be hosting a reception this weekend at Wyvern Abbey, and that Dr. Marr would be attending. He ordered his accomplices to find a way to infiltrate the place and clear away any obstacles to ensure the plan's success. Early the next morning, Eileen recounted the entire events of the previous night to Jimmy. Jimmy was astonished to find such a secret society in the heart of London. However, he reassured her that secret groups were not uncommon in the city. Eileen pondered, noting that Bill's behavior was suspicious. He clearly knew about the 7 dials, but was deliberately pretending not to know. Before the story was over, the person Eileen had been waiting for arrived. Jimmy stood up and introduced her as Lorraine, Wade's half-sister. Lorraine had lived in Italy for many years and had recently returned to London. Lorraine was visibly distraught over her brother's death. Eileen showed her the suicide note and asked if she knew anything about the phrase, the 7 dials. Lorraine admitted that she had been to the club and had been severely scolded by her brother for it, but she knew nothing else. Eileen believed that the leader
Yes,
of the
I
secret
do,
society,
Edwin.
codenamed
I
Number
live
7,
in
would be
South
at Wyvern
Africa.
Abbey,
Also
and
in
that he
South
was likely the
Africa.
one who killed both Wade and Ronnie, and might even commit further crimes. Worried about Eileen's safety if she acted alone, they devised a plan to infiltrate the party. Bill would pose as a wealthy young man wanting to enter politics to approach George Lomax, believing he would
Here in
soon
Nairobi.
fall into the trap. To prepare for the weekend's plan, Eileen proactively contacted Deputy Secretary George Lomax, claiming she wanted 2
I didn't know you
invitations to a
guys
party to
had
approach the
been that
mysterious
rare.
Dr. Marr. George Lomax, on the other end of the line, was utterly astonished that this was a secret meeting of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and he couldn't understand how an outsider knew about it. Eileen cleverly fabricated a reason, suggesting her mother could advise him on diplomatic protocol to distract him. Already troubled by this, George Lomax was delighted and promised to visit her
Sometimes I love the
that
rain, but
afternoon,
sometimes
George Lomax arrived, but Eileen's
it can
mother
get
seemed
too much.
unenthusiastic about receiving him, believing that working
But
for
this
free
heat
was
is
pointless.
bad. I'll
Eileen
pretend
had to
the rain is
persuade
raining.
her mother to meet him briefly, explaining that the party was extremely important. George Lomax explained that the party was personally commissioned by the Prime Minister to welcome a Cameroonian inventor named Dr. Marr. When Eileen inquired about the invention, George Lomax excitedly revealed that Dr. Marr had created a type of steel alloy with extremely high strength. According to rumors, even a thin layer of this type of steel is as strong as a steel plate half a foot thick. If applied to the military, it would significantly increase combat power. But conversely, if it fell into the wrong hands, the consequences would be unimaginable. He also revealed that just yesterday, the State Department had received an anonymous letter bearing the seal of the 7 dials, threatening that if they insisted on proceeding with the conference, their lives would be in danger. Time flew by, the weekend arrived, and the diplomatic party was held as planned. Jimmy successfully infiltrated the venue, accompanied by the steel magnate, Viscount Coote. What surprised Eileen most was that the person in charge of security for the party was none other than Sheriff Battle. Everyone was hunting while waiting for the main character, and it wasn't until late afternoon that Dr. Marr appeared. As George Lomax stepped forward to greet everyone, Eileen's eyes scanned everyone present, trying to deduce which of them
guys,
was the
look who's
mysterious number 7.
here.
As dusk fell and
Shit
dinner
face
began, George Lomax
Yusuf.
tapped his wine glass and asked Dr.
Pacific?
Marr to introduce himself. The doctor recounted that he was born in Cameroon and, thanks to his father's influence, had the opportunity to study in Germany. After graduating, he joined the
Apelele
army. Viscount
unjani?
Coote immediately pressed
Oh,
him
bingelele
on which army he
nokubingelela.
had served
Apelele
in.
loves you.
Dr. Marr
Hi,
honestly
Apelele.
replied that he had served in the German army and had fought in the war, but it was out of necessity. At that time, West Africa was engulfed in the flames of war, causing him to lose all his loved ones. That was also the reason he wanted to dedicate this invention to the Allies, hoping that the world world would no longer have wars.
How you doing
Viscount
today,
Coot, upon
Yusuf?
hearing this, sarcastically remarked that he had worked in the steel industry his whole life, but had never heard of such a miraculous material. To prove his point, Dr. Marr pulled a watch from his pocket and presented it as a prototype made from that very steel. It not only resists corrosion and heat well, but is also many times harder than ordinary steel. Seeing that Viscount Coot was still skeptical, Dr. Marr invited him to test it, and the actual results far exceeded his expectations, leaving Viscount Coot speechless.
I'm not married. Are you married?
Find your happy place with Auto Trader.
Lomax reassured Dr. Marr to enjoy the party because security tonight was handled by London's most elite police force. As long as the formula and samples were securely stored in the safe, he dared to guarantee on his honor that even God himself couldn't take them. After dinner, everyone returned to their rooms to rest, except for the three young people who couldn't sit still. Eileen pulled Jimmy and Bill aside to discuss a plan to catch number 7 when he tried to steal the formula. She had chosen an excellent vantage point and intended
Here
to
you
use
come
a
with that
wait-and-see
shit again,
strategy.
Yusuf.
Jimmy,
I
being
don't
very
understand
chivalrous,
it.
suggested that such dangerous and
I don't
arduous
understand what it
tasks should be
means.
handled by the men. Bill completely agreed with this point of view, and to ensure absolute safety, Jimmy even armed himself with a
My
gun.
throat
After
is
discussing the
swelling all of a
matter, the
sudden.
two men urged Eileen to return to her room and instructed her to get plenty of rest. However, in this situation, how could Eileen possibly fall asleep? She tossed and turned, thinking that the villain who had murdered her lover was likely hiding within the manor, and her rage made her want to immediately capture him and bring him to justice. Unable to sit still, she changed into a neat night outfit and climbed out of her window. Fortunately, the vegetation below the window was very lush, so she landed safely. Eileen planned to go around to the back of the manor to set up another outpost. However, after only a few steps, she was startled to see a dark figure approaching. It turned out that the man was Sheriff Battle, who was also secretly patrolling the night. Eileen was about to explain why she had climbed the wall, but Battle didn't let her finish her sentence. He immediately pulled her back into the manor and sternly warned her not to cause any trouble. He emphasized that this was a high-level diplomatic operation and any mishap would result in no one being held responsible. Just as Battle finished speaking, screams suddenly erupted from the second floor. Eileen reacted quickly, being the first to rush upstairs and discovering that the guard had disappeared. A premonition of something bad told her to run frantically towards Jimmy's room. The group broke down the door and witnessed a horrifying scene. Jimmy was slumped on the windowsill, covered in blood, and the air reeked of gunpowder. The group held their breath, checking and breathing a sigh of relief when they found Jimmy still alive. But he was groaning in pain from a gunshot wound to his right arm. Battle gently asked what had happened. Jimmy gritted his teeth in pain and recounted that a dark figure had suddenly attacked him, and in a panic, he had fired indiscriminately. It seemed the attacker returned fire once before fleeing. From Jimmy's brief observation, the attacker was extremely muscular. Battle looked around the room and suddenly noticed the unusual absence of Dr. Marr, as he should have been present given the loud noise. Eileen also immediately sensed something was wrong, and the two of them rushed up to the third floor. When they pushed open Dr. Marr's door, they found him still lying motionless on the bed. Battle's initial examination revealed that he appeared to be merely asleep, but Eileen, with her keen observation,
Unfortunately, my battery is low,
this was clearly no
so
normal
I will be
sleep.
leaving
Someone
for
had drugged
now.
Dr. Marr. This situation was identical to Wade's death, and even more frightening was that the vial of anesthetic was the same one found at the previous crime scene. Battle went around to the other side of the bed to check the safe and